Hello, everyone. Today we have another history reading. About an afterlife for the Khan, Muslims, Buddhists, and sacred kingship in Mongol Iran. This is a book by Dr. Jonathan, and I was inspired to do this podcast because someone reached out to me, an Arab person reached out to me on the internet from Malaysia. So if you think about Malaysia as like this cosmopolitan paradise in Asia, right? Like we have certain Tibetan schools of Buddhism there as well. And then there's like this long tradition of cultural exchange between like seafaring Arabs and then Asians of various races, including Han Chinese. And it's such an auspicious time right now. Unfortunately, I learned yesterday that His Highness, the Aga Khan, passed away on Tuesday. And that was around the time when this Arab person reached out to me on the internet. And he really encouraged me to keep doing what I'm doing right now. And today I also got a call from my favorite person, Revati and Venus friend, Dalip. And I think he's also like cheering me on to keep being myself. And I'm so grateful because, yeah, we are facing a lot of obstacles and a lot of Tamasic energy in the United States. I don't know if you guys would agree or not with this assessment, but yeah, like when you think of like onions, garlic, all those strong energy drinks, things of that nature, that's the vibe that the US is giving right now. And what saved me from my own Tamasic energy, like throughout these turbulent years, transitioning from graduate school to where I am today, like just streaming and stuff, were my Shia Muslim friends. Like they really did a lot of hand holding. And I'm not going to like mention them one by one for the sake of time, but I just wanted to like shout out in general, like they really balance things out in the West, especially like when you are faced with so many like challenges as like a non-Caucasian person. Like they really like helped me through like understanding like it's okay, everything's okay. So yeah, that being said, let's jump into this book. I am not familiar with the Mongol names. This is a history book that focuses on the work of a historian who was a Jewish person and then he converted during his service for the Mongol kings. And I found it particularly appropriate because we are facing transitions in our own traditions as well. And then right now we can do kind of like a rehearsal with His Highness Prince Karim Aga Khan. I also watched his funeral live stream from Portugal. And one of the historians, Dr. Sanjay Subramaniam, he actually learned Portuguese in order to create his theory about history that informed this book that we are going to get into right now. So he is an influential historian from South India, and his brother is also Jay Shankar, the foreign spokesperson or minister, like one of the top officials of the current Modi administration in India. And I found out about that like probably this past year. I was looking him up. I was like, oh my gosh, he's the brother of Jay Shankar. And then I realized like a lot of what he did on early modern history was so original in a way because he really defined like the moment of the 1500s, 1600s as like the point in which India becomes India and then the rest of the world becomes the rest of the world. And in one of his chapters on how he learned Portuguese, he actually said that like in order to learn about India, you have to leave India. And I think Indians are also experiencing this moment where they were like, we have so much spiritual knowledge to share, but no one's listening to us, you know, like this Mahakumbh in the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, so there's a lot to be done, and I'm so excited to read this book to you guys. In 1254, after a long and anxious wait at the Mongol Empire's capital of Karakorum, the Flemish friar and missionary William of Rubruck finally got his wish to preach in person to the Mongol Khan Mongke, reign from 1251 to 59. Before meeting the emperor, however, there was one final obstacle to overcome: outperforming his Muslim and Buddhist contenders in an interreligious debate. This multilateral court disputation was the first documented debate of its kind that included Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists. For William and for the Catholic Church more broadly, the encounter with Buddhism was entirely new. For the Muslim debaters, it was by no means the first interaction with Buddhists. Islam and Buddhism had a prolonged history of religious, intellectual, and commercial encounters and exchanges, but one that was fraught with friction and rivalry as well. From our historical hindsight, however, this 1254 exchange in Mongolia can be seen as marking a new page in Muslim Buddhist relations, not in the eastern territories of the Mongol Empire, China, and Mongolia, but rather further west at the other end of Mongol dominated Eurasia in Iran, which would shortly become the seat of the independent Mongol state of the Ilkhanate, 1260 to 1335. Established by Genghis Khan's grandson Hulagu, reigned 1260 to 65 in Iran, Iraq, and Azerbaijan, areas with a predominantly Muslim population, the Ilkhanate would become a destination for Buddhist monks from across Eurasia. These Buddhist experts would travel great distances to spread the Dharma and take advantage of the opportunities of patronage that the new Mongol rulers of Iran, the Ilkhans, offered. In the late 1280s, some 30 years after William's visit to Karakorum, the Ilkhanate court in Iran experienced the height of interfaith exchanges. Learned monks gathered at the court of Buddhist enthusiasts. Ilkhan Argun reigned 1284 to 91 and debated with Muslims and possibly others. It is against this backdrop that this book's protagonist, Rashid ad-Din, death 1318, then still a court physician and an up-and-coming bureaucrat, found himself embroiled in a disputation with one of the Mongol king's cherished monks. Rashid ad-Din describes his exchange in a treatise written nearly 2 decades after the event and under very different circumstances. He was at the height of his tenure as vizier, the most powerful civil servant in the Ilkhanate state, and Islam had already prevailed over Buddhism to become the official religion of the Ilkhanate rulers. Rashid ad-Din does not name his contender and refers to him only as a Bakshi, a Buddhist priest. The Buddhist asked Rashid ad-Din the following question in Argun's presence: what came first, the bird or the egg? Rashid ad-Din notes that this was a famous fable among the Buddhists. The monk indeed evoked a well-known Buddhist enigma that appeared in the Questions of Milinda, a Pali dialogue between a Buddhist sage and the Greek king Menander of Bactria, probably composed between 150 BC and 100 AD. Rashid ad-Din writes that while the monk believed that he would fail to solve the riddle, he was confounded by it for only a moment before God divulged to him the answer. He does not tell us what answer he ended up providing, nor whether the Buddhist offered a rebuttal. Instead, Rashid ad-Din downplays his Buddhist rival, dismissing the monk as ignorant of the true meaning of his own riddle. Yet he does not disregard the question itself as a catalyst of theological inquiry. Rashid ad-Din is inspired by it, and in the remainder of this treatise, he proceeds to contemplate Islamic philosophical points regarding issues such as the createdness of Adam and the divine source of primordial human knowledge. Rashid ad-Din's account of this debate certainly differs from the Flemish friar William's report to the Pope about his multilateral debate at Mongke's court in Mongolia. For one, William provides more detail about how the debate with the Chinese Buddhist representative evolved and about the type of arguments that each party employed. We know they debated the existence and unity of God and the cause of evil, the differences between the Persian Muslims and the Flemish Christian accounts notwithstanding. There are also striking parallels between the two. Both downplay the intellectual fortitude of their Buddhist opponents, and both emphasize their recourse to their own scholastic traditions of rational argumentation to overcome the challenges mounted by their Buddhist contenders rather than relying on Muslim or Christian scriptures. Whereas both might have underscored cultural and linguistic disparities, whether explicitly or implicitly, their accounts ultimately give the impression of a common vocabulary, that of rational argumentation. So, for the record, I also tried sharing a Japanese Buddhist koan about the island where no one is there except one person, and no, the tree. The tree falls on an island with no one there. Does it make a sound? I've shared that one with my Muslim friends before. Yeah, this reminded me of that. Scholastic disputation indeed emerges from their reports as a shared currency enabling a certain exchange of ideas. Yet how far did such exchanges go? William's account suggests that the debates went beyond the exchange of riddles and parables and could include hefty theological arguments. It also gives the impression, however, that the two parties remained ingrained in their own scholastic traditions. Rashid ad-Din's account, on the other hand, leaves more to the imagination. He gives the impression that few meaningful intellectual exchanges between Muslims and Buddhists took place under Mongol rule in Iran, and this impression is amplified by the general dearth of Muslim Ilkhanid descriptions of such exchanges, as well as the complete absence of any Buddhist textual documentation from the Ilkhanid. Yet it is hard to reconcile this impression with what we know of the prevalence of Buddhism and the flourishing of the Buddhists during the Ilkhanid's first 4 decades. As this book shows, a thorough examination of the Ilkhanid vizier Rashid ad-Din's extensive theological works demonstrates that Buddhist, Muslim, and Mongol exchanges have left deeper and more consequential impressions than the silence of contemporaneous Muslim authors implies. Muslims at the court were exposed to and made a considerable effort to respond to Buddhist concepts. These might not have been the finer points of the Dharma, but rather, as we will see, Buddhist methods of engaging with political authorities and conversion strategies. An Afterlife for the Khan explores the Ilkhanid court of the late 13th and early 14th century as an arena of interreligious exchange and rivalry, where the conceptual differences and equivalences between various Eurasian structures of power and sacrality, Islamic, Buddhist, and Mongol, were debated and deployed. It unearths the various subtle ways in which cultural and religious agents employed their religious and political resources to accommodate, translate, manipulate, and subvert the symbols and structures of the religious other. Focusing on the theological, philosophical works of a Persian Muslim vizier active in the intellectual scene of the Ilkhanid court at the turn of the 14th century, An Afterlife for the Khan shows how the Persian Muslim experience of Buddhism and its system of karmic righteous kingship on the one hand, and the accommodation of and resistance to the Mongol model of divinized kingship on the other, generated and informed processes of creative experimentation in new modes of Islamic sacral kingship. Buddhists marketed concepts and models of karmic kingship as means of translating, reaffirming, and converting their Chinggisid patrons' claims to deified kingship. The Islamic challenge entailed, therefore, not only with winning their Ilkhanid patrons to the Muslim faith or cementing their commitment to Islam in the case of the Mongols who had already converted, but also uprooting their previous Buddhist education. Rashid ad-Din stood at the center of the Muslim conversion efforts. In his theological and historical writings, invigorated by the lively atmosphere of an intellectually rigorous and religiously competitive royal court, Rashid ad-Din not only engaged in the translation and assimilation of Buddhist narratives and concepts, or painstakingly attempted to dispute and disprove the Buddhist doctrine of reincarnation. He was also inspired and informed by his Buddhist competitors and their strategies of conversion and the domestication of Chinggisid rulers. To this end, he experimented with a model of Mongol Muslim kingship that paralleled Buddhism's structure of karmic righteous rulership. This book argues that Rashid ad-Din's Buddhist and Mongol-informed experimentation in Islamic theological discourses formed a crucial intermediate stage between the two more dominant frameworks for legitimizing Islamic sultanic authority, the pre-Mongol phase of a restrictive, legalistic, and genealogical-based caliphal structure, and the post-Mongol independent model of universal and sacral Islamic rulership buttressed by saintly and messianic discourses. The Mongol occupation of Baghdad and the consequent elimination of the Abbasid Caliphate in 1258 represented a dramatic event that shattered the religio-political foundation of the Sunni majority's world. This cataclysm inaugurated an era of unprecedented constitutional crisis that exacerbated after the collapse of the Ilkhanate state in 1335. In subsequent centuries, new strategies for legitimizing sultanic authority were formulated to resolve this crisis, such as the 1818 title given to the Aga Khans by the Persian king. Just think about it, like how much effort has been put into this project from different nations. And now we are at another crucial point in history. Okay. To that end, Muslim intellectuals increasingly made use of and elaborated on innovative, comprehensive, and compelling vocabulary of sovereignty that effectively shifted the discourse of sultanic legitimacy away from the pre-Mongol restrictive genealogical and juridical parameters of Sunni authority. In its place, there emerged a new discursive realm of universal Islamic kingship that referenced and interlinked a variety of intellectual fields from philosophy and theology to astrology, mysticism, and the occult. Rashid ad-Din's work and the occult. This is a horoscope clipping, and this is Dr. Sanjay Subramaniam's birth chart. He has Saturn retrograde conjunct Jupiter in Capricorn. Rashid ad-Din's works mark the end of caliphal authority and the beginning of this new age of Islamic authority. In the remainder of this introduction, we first explore the central theoretical foundation of this research into sacred kingship and the strategies of religious agents with the Mongol rulers. Subsequently, we provide two short historical overviews on Rashid ad-Din and the Buddhist movement of Ilkhanate Iran. We end the introduction with a brief outline of the book's chapter. Mongol Sacred Kingship. By the end of Genghis Khan's life in 1227, or under his son Ogode, 1229 reigned to 1241, a coherent, albeit succinctly articulated message about the legitimacy of the Mongol emperors as universal rulers was forged and propagated, grounded in Genghis Khan's exceptional affinity with Tengeri, eternal heaven, the supreme sky deity of inner Asian traditions. I don't know about Ladakh, but His Eminence Palga Rinpoche also has the title of Lama Khan. So a lot of the devotees would say Chaksa Lama Khan in his live stream. And this title Khan is like a recurring theme in contemporary figures of authority. So Tengeri, eternal heaven. The Chinggisid affinity with heaven was commonly expressed in the following Mongolian formula, found with relatively little variation in the Mongols' ultimatums. By the might of eternal heaven, by the good fortune of the Khan, great Khan. This formula revolved around two main legitimizing assertions that also had deep roots in the imperial legacies of the Eurasian steppe. First, the claim that eternal heaven selected Genghis Khan and conferred on him its blessing and protection, hence his exclusive mandate to universal conquest and domination. Second, Genghis Khan was in possession of a special good fortune, Su in Mongolian, Kut in Turkish, which further confirmed his identity as heaven's chosen ruler and predestined his success as the fortunate universal emperor. Furthermore, the Chengizids advocated for a heavenly lineage through the miraculous impregnation of Genghis Khan's mythical ancestress, Alankoa. Potential Chinggisid successors and reigning Khans were expected to demonstrate their personal merit-based qualification for the position, as well as empirical validation that they were in possession of Tengri's favor. They were also required to cultivate their relationship with the imperial founder so that heaven's blessing would continue flowing to the Chengizids and, by extension, to the polities they ruled. Chenghisid princes and Khans had several ways to maintain and solidify their relationship with Genghis Khan, including claiming privileged descent within the Chenghisid lineage, cultivating the ritualized reverence of Genghis Khan and the family's ancestral cult, and imitating the divine-like traits attributed to the imperial founder. So that is also some of the similarities we see in Nizari Ismailism, which is the community known to be all following the Aga Khan, as they call it today. These were malleable and subject to reinterpretation, yet they seem to have generally entailed Genghis Khan's supramundane intelligence and sense of right and premonition or intuitive divine knowledge attained through his personal communion with heaven. From the perspective of the sociology of religion, the Mongols endorsed a deified or immanentist model of sacred kingship. Immanent. Religion as a whole can be seen as consisting of two contrasting tendencies towards transcendent and immanent. These two terms can be assigned to specific characteristics with most religions or to religions in their entirety. Transcendentalist religions such as Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and philosophical Hinduism is their orientation around individual salvation and universal ethics. These religions are institutionalized via scriptural canons and formal doctrines. They entail hierarchical clerical ranks whose members claim higher moral authority thanks to their ability to decipher the textual canon and thus the tradition's promise. Okay. I think we're going to end the book's reading here. We have reached 20 minutes, and I think a lot of people find that quite long already. And one last note I wanted to talk about is I'm seeing 100 a lot. And the recent star at Mahakumbh, Shri Abhay Singh, he's a former IIT graduate, and he's lovingly called IITBaba. He actually started talking about the certain siddhis he has attained, not through necessarily reading, but his life experience. So one thing he noted was that in the numerology of 100, one is for Vishnu, Shri Vishnu, which is a deity that has purportedly come down 10 times, and one of his incarnation is claimed to be the Buddha in Hinduism. So one is for Vishnu, and the zeros are for Shiva. As we know, Indians invented zero. And I find this quite useful for my own life at this point as well, because at some point, even I was trying to pivot towards zero more. And then I realized it was not working. You cannot have only all zeros. Yeah, physics. There you have it, numerology of 100. And I hope you guys like this reading. Share, comment, subscribe. And we may or may not have a second reading of this book, depending on, the political, sociological environment. Thank you very much for watching. Signing off. This is Adrian, and Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Say that if you are experiencing difficulties in your life.